Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is Defub21 and as always we have a new video game trailer for us to look at and for me to tell you what I think. This is the launch trailer for The Surge, which is as they call them these days, a Souls-like, in other words a Dark Souls-like third-person action RPG. I believe at the time of recording it's out in 24 hours. I think it's out on the 16th of May. I could be wrong and that might be out later on in the week, but it's out very, very soon. So without further ado, let's take a look and then I shall bore you afterwards with my thoughts.
Don't you want to wake up to a brighter future? Isn't that what everyone wants? We can all make a difference.
Rig installation program.
Log 5. They consume and process the organic matter they find. Log 6. There's a pattern here. It's not just a system anymore. It's alive. Log 8. It's not just building structures anymore. It's creating life.
Well, first things first, it does seem to, that trailer, include a certain amount of kind of CGI I've seen in previous trailers before. So kind of a bit of story information as well in it. But yeah, it's all right. The game in question is an interesting one in that it's been made by the same people who made Lords of the Fallen, which is another Dark Souls-like game that came out early enough in the 360 or the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4's lifespans. It didn't. I don't think it did terribly well. I think it got fantastic reviews. I mean, it definitely turned up on Games with Gold as a free game comparatively quickly for a new IP / new AAA release. It was like maybe a year, maybe less than that. There's a lot of games, AAA games, that have come out since the launch of the Xbox One and the PS4 that have not yet gotten the Games of Gold treatment that were AAA games, and this one's Lords of the Fallen though certainly did. This game appears to be, I mean, what's interesting about this game, and I've really got to commend them, Lords of the Fallen had the problem that it was kind of set in the same kind of a similar kind of, obviously, swords and sorcery, axes, swords, bows and arrows type world as the Dark Souls games. This one, and credit where credit is due, of those kind of developers that have tried to make Dark Souls-like games, or as they say, Souls-like games, most of them have been indie developers. Lords of the Fallen, I think, was one of the first real AAA attempts at a Souls-like game that's been made to date by someone who isn't from software. And certainly by a Western studio. If everyone knows any different, let me know in the comments. But it kind of, I think, by sticking with the similar kind of medieval, swords and sorcery world, kind of like Dark Souls, but although Dark Souls, its world is very much unique to Dark Souls, I don't think it differentiated itself enough from Dark Souls, and there were, I played it a little bit, wasn't very impressed. I had issues with the controls and the gameplay. I don't think, like in the reviews, just seemed to be the consensus seems to have been that it just wasn't quite good enough. This game, aka The Surge, however, is set in a very, very different universe from either the Dark Souls games or Lords of the Fallen or any other Souls-like game that I'm aware of off the top of my head. In that it's set in a science fiction setting with both robots and kind of cyborg slash dudes in power armor, and looks, by extension of that, looks kind of very distinct from Dark Souls, very distinct from Lords of the Fallen, and from a visual style, the tone, the lighting is also much brighter in the previous game, so it's not as kind of it's not a grimy world, as it were, like the Dark Souls world is, or Lords of the Fallen, or again a lot of the indie games I've seen out there that kind of try and follow in 2D, typically either side-scrolling platform or from above, the kind of Dark Souls way of doing things, but in, again, a lower budget form. So that, for that reason alone, I think is very, very clever of them, the developers slash publishers of this game, because it really does set it apart from Dark Souls, from Lords of the Fallen. And I think there's a significant audience out there, I think, who might have been interested in playing Dark Souls type games, but just don't like the kind of swords and sorcery medieval setting. They just don't like it. I myself, for instance, have been, as an example, I'm generally much more partial to kind of Fallout 3 / Fallout 4 than I was to either Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Skyrim, because of the kind of futuristic setting, and because, as a side note, I don't think first-person melee combat works. If you disagree with me, again, let me know in the comments. But it's again, it's very clever of them to do this. It sets the game very much apart from any other ones in this new kind of sub-genre that From Software has helped create, which is a very clever thing to do. And while I haven't seen any reviews yet, which is a bit concerning considering how close the game is to release, from those kind of YouTubers I trust, who do have access to either the final code or probably the game minus the day one patch that we always get these days, their feedback has been positive, that the gameplay mechanics, control mechanics, and so on have been significantly improved over the previous their previous game, Lords of the Fallen. And I think it's a relatively, again, I could be completely wrong. There could be some amazing games coming out in this one. I know Prey has come out already, but I'm not aware of that many titles, or any titles for that matter, that really interest me, that are coming out in the next 30 days. So this could be a time for the Surge to shine, if it works out. Again, it'll be interesting to see the reviews, and again, I'd have to give this trailer a bit of a negative, because it does include stuff I've seen in CGI stuff I've seen in previous trailers. But really kind of, it's like sometimes you might think, well, why should you give someone the thumbs up for doing the obvious thing? I mean, if you want to, again, differentiate, make your Souls-like game and differentiate it from Dark Souls and the other ones, a sci-fi setting with robots is a very obvious and easy way to do that. But if you use as another example, Battlefield 1 was a very clever thing to do, abandoning a kind of a near future or a modern day setting for World War I, which you don't really see much of in AAA games, first person shooters or otherwise. Was a very clever thing to do. It really set the Battlefield franchise apart from Call of Duty, and unfortunately from Titanfall 2 as well, which was released a week later. I can't believe EA was that stupid, but again, that's another rant for another day. But again, when it comes to big budget AAA games, the management types who tend to be in charge at the end of the day, who are still mostly kind of older, Gen Xers or boomers, who are the two principal demographic groups that are alive and breathing today, that do not, where the majority of them, or the vast majority of them, do not play video games. And therefore the industry, particularly the Western industry, is still kind of stuck with people who can greenlight projects or interfere with a game's development, who don't actually play video games and don't understand the product, and by extension truly don't understand the industry they're in, sticking their nose in where it doesn't belong, or being overly risk averse Again, Battlefield 1 in that climate was quite the surprise because it's a rather substantial left turn. And it's the same thing with the Surge. I mean, you would think with many of them it's kind of there is a kind of a Me Too element to the video game, particularly the big budget video game space. And, you know, everyone else's grass is greener. And one would think the instinct would be to keep trying to, as it were, ape Dark Souls or ape Call of Duty. And in both the case of Battlefield 1 and in the case of the Surge, the people making these games, and we assume publishing them, were smart enough. Well, in the case we know with EA publishing, obviously Battlefield 1. I don't know if it's who's publishing the Surge. But either way, they were smart enough to go to differentiate their products. EA was, I believe, pretty richly rewarded for that. I think Battlefield 1 did very, very well. And hopefully for the people making the Surge, they are equal, well, maybe not to the same scale rewarded, because again, this Souls-like games are more of a niche genre compared to first-person shooters. But still, I hope they are rewarded for this and the game is a success. We can always have the more competition in the marketplace, the more competition in genres, the better. And particularly the more competition where it's not just one company blatantly ripping off another company's product. So let me know your thoughts on the trailer and on this game, and if you're interested in buying it in the comments below. Please like this video, and if for some strange reason, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so for more scintillating content like this. This is Defub21 signing off. Toodaloo.